You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is different and Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. Wait. All right, welcome back. Welcome back. I'm like, y'all couldn't even hear. I was on mute. We are talking something federal today. We're talking about Joe Biden's reelection campaign is kicking off high gear here in the city of Detroit. I'm Khary Frazier here with Public Comment every Thursday, where we're talking about things local, municipal, politics, and so much more. Malachi, how you feeling?
Good morning. I'm feeling good.
All right, we had an interesting pregame discussion about like so much of this federal stuff, and we're gonna really get into it. And you actually had an opportunity to meet with somebody like boots on the ground that's engaging in Detroit. I want you to talk a little bit about that for the Biden reelection campaign and what stands. So, get that introduction.
Yeah, so I wanted to call attention to this because there's been a increase in activity around Detroit. The president, obviously, in his reelection campaign, needs Michigan. Uh, when you kind of look at the electoral college map, Michigan's a really important battleground state. It's also changed hands a number of times in recent elections. Going to Obama twice before flipping for Trump in 2016 very narrowly, and then Biden picked it back up last time around. It's still in play, I think, for Republicans, and a lot of polling shows that Biden might have some ground to make up here in Michigan. So it remains a pretty important target for them, among some other kind of Midwest states and Arizona and Georgia as well. But basically, I had the opportunity to meet with some folks who are in the campaign kind of organizations. So these are people who are involved with actually running the work of getting boots on the ground, getting voters organized, putting together lists, putting together data on Democratic voters. They have a lot of information about kind of what preferences are for voters and what their voting history is, and they use that to inform outreach efforts.
And this is what's so unique, because also it's been a lot of discussions that definitely come across my way where people know that it's like I'm so opinionated about things and the role of the black vote, and specifically black men, because once again it seems as though the idea that black men are going to support Donald Trump or not being engaged in voting at all has come to life around this reelection campaign. And the thing that really is bothersome for me is that the tactics from all candidates seems to be to scare us into voting instead of just doing something for us, especially when it comes to the Biden campaign. Joe Biden is in office right now. Something can be done directly to impact the livelihood and quality of life of black men. And I definitely know from so many exhaustive conversations I've had with people over the years in politics saying, like, you can't make policies to specifically impact one group of people. I've been told this exhaustively when it comes to black people, but it seems as though, and I know I'm definitely sounding like that person on the street, it's been some policies that have been engaged to specifically engage one group of people. Was anything necessarily, as they're pulling and polling data and everything, a couple of things to really highlight is, as you talk about, Michigan is a key state, but really that's saying Detroit is a key place, because Michigan is a very, very red state. I was a truck driver in this state for a while, and when you go to the nooks and crannies of Michigan, there definitely are Democrats throughout the state. And Democrats we would see would usually support the Democratic Party, but there are a lot of red folks throughout this state and staunch Republicans. So anytime there is a strong Democratic victory in the state of Michigan, whether it be governor or for president, that means that Detroit is hella engaged. Hella engaged. The mayor of Detroit is heavy in this. His son is one of the key people on the committee for the reelection of Biden Harris ticket. And that's another thing. The bringing in Kamala Harris, vice president, definitely looking to engage the black vote connected to the city of Detroit. And this also looms over the shadow of, I believe, a very impactful, uncommitted vote effort from a lot of the Arab community that exists in and around Dearborn specifically, but Metro Detroit too. Can you speak a little to what he was saying in reference to that?
Yeah. So strategy wise, you're right. I mean, it becomes very difficult for Republicans to win Michigan in a presidential race if turnout is high in Detroit, in some of these Democratic strongholds like Flint, Saginaw, to a lesser extent, Oakland County, although that a lot of those suburban communities have been trending pretty heavily Democrat. So basically, if Democrats come out and vote in the numbers that they had in some past elections, it becomes very difficult math wise for Trump to get enough votes. When he won in 2016, it was in part because there was a pretty depressed turnout for Democrats. A lot of people were voting third party that year. So the reelection campaign for President Biden has been holding events in Detroit to criticize Trump, to kind of draw distinctions between his record and Trump's record, and also to flex some support from some surrogates like the mayor, like Council President Mary Sheffield, like the Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. And they're speaking to a couple of issues. I think we're going to see a lot more emphasis on issues that the campaign thinks resonates with Black voters. I'm curious to see what actually does resonate with voters and makes them feel like it's worth getting involved in this election, because there certainly is a lot of kind of frustration. But some things that they've been focusing on so far: Biden's support for unions. On Tuesday, Council President Sheffield joined the mayor, some state reps, some union officials to talk about Biden's support for the UAW during the auto strikes, his kind of long record of support there. That's also something he talked about quite a bit when he came to Saginaw earlier this year. He came to Warren earlier this year to meet with some UAW workers. I think that was kind of at the tail end of the strike. That was in like early February. Another event earlier this month, tapping Wayne County Commissioner Alicia Bell, was recognizing Black Maternal Health Week. So that is, something that they think would resonate with voters here. They talked about how abortion bans led to higher rates of pregnancy-related deaths among Black women, and some of the comorbidities and the issues there, where we know like infant mortality and maternal mortality among Black folks are much higher. So, trying to make that connection that Trump's influence on the Supreme Court and getting Roe v. Wade overturned has led to more medical issues there. And then Biden's team also opened some campaign offices in Detroit, 3 in the city, which is the most out of any city in Michigan. And also the Affordable Care Act is another thing that they had focused on in a recent event with Attorney General Dana Nessel, which was more of an Obama-Biden White House victory than a Biden-Harris White House victory. But that's another issue. I think that they think resonates with a lot of folks who have, better access to healthcare as a result of that.
And this is so unique because this highlights, especially like, I guess, my who I represent, Black men, and it's something coming up soon with Building Brick Masters, a group that I'm affiliated with, where I'm going to be facilitating a discussion with the Brick Masters. It's an intergenerational group of Black men, so from baby boomers all the way to Gen Z, where we're going to talk politics or politricks. It's going to be an interesting discussion because it was an offshoot discussion from one of the brothers of the group that said, look, I was doing better in business under Trump. And it's almost like a pin drop in a room full of so many people that have been staunch Democrats most of their life. It's unique because Black men, once again, I think are being looked at and targeted as like, you're the reason why our community is so messed up, which in some ways they're definitely, it's, as they say, it's tough, because when we think about the journey of what Black men have dealt with in America, and then what opportunities exist, it's tough. And then it provides more of the divisiveness. I think one of the most tragic things that has come to life during the Donald Trump era of politics is he's leaned into divisions more than anything else. So I really feel that the nation itself is very fragmented, but even the state of Michigan. So like, if you travel the state of Michigan, you're going to see some strong Trump flags, and like, not like bigger than lawn signs, almost like banners throughout the state of Michigan. So you definitely see the support of Donald Trump. And me personally, and this almost drives people extremely insane in a lot of ways, I definitely feel as though both both Donald Trump and Joe Biden in presidency dealing with COVID-19 were faced with challenges unprecedented from that many presidents have not dealt with, at least in my lifetime I've seen. So it's some stark things to look at. And really, when we look at what any president has provided for the Black community, I really shake my head at, like, I mean, I don't know, possibly we got to go back to uh, maybe the Civil Rights Bill, you know what I'm saying? Lyndon Baines Johnson, you know what I'm saying? And even with him, I mean, he was a staunch. We definitely know sometimes his stances on dealing with Black people, as he was telling Martin Luther King, "You got to force me to do this." And since then, my stance is kind of from that angle. I believe that we should have a constituency within our community, an agenda in our community that's strong enough for anyone that sits as president of the United States will be supportive of what our agenda is, no matter what, which I think sounds provocative anyway, because the Democratic Party have stood as the stewards connected to Black communities for decades now. And I don't think that it's been equitable access to a lot of the uh, assets, resources, opportunities provided throughout the Black community, stewarded through Democratic leadership the way it should be. And some of this may be critiques in the people in leadership positions in our own community, but either way, it's still through this lens of scarcity that definitely exists. So the stance I take on all of these people is reparations should be the policy that should be supported by anyone running for president if you want the support of the Black community. Reparations are nothing. That right there should be the starting point and really ending point. And anything other than that, I feel like is arbitrary as far as like where we're gonna sway. Recently, Robert Kennedy Jr. Was here in Detroit doing some events with Icewear Vezo. Shout out Vezo and everything. And it's definitely had some Democratic people like, what is he doing with these rappers? You know what I'm saying? And it's so interesting because it's like, I didn't even necessarily know these people even knew who Icewear Vezo was, some of the old heads, but they're more so just triggered by the fact that Icewear Vezo was engaged to connect. And I'm sure that it's definitely going to be some resources shared from the Robert Kennedy election campaign. But the tough thing, even with Robert Kennedy, is that guy is like probably a stronger Zionist than Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And that's another big elephant in the room from my lens of human rights, that like all three of these presidents blindly support all of the genocide that's going on in Israel right now. Was anything even brought up in the discussion in reference to that? As that is, I feel like we're watching people be slaughtered right now, and our weapons and our money from America is funding this. Was anything spoke of in that discussion with the campaign person?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, I was talking to some kind of lower level folks. I'd be curious to see what, I mean, I'd be curious to see what the president himself would say if he came to Michigan and had to address that head on. I think that
wait. We got to say he did come to Michigan, but he kind of snuck in Michigan because there was so many rallies saying we're going to protest this, as there have been stronger and stronger protests across the nation, as we're seeing even what's happening on Columbia's campus, a lot of universities and colleges. It's looking similar to what was happening at Kent State, where students are being arrested for protesting against everything that's going on in the genocide. So people kind of understand the American troops are not on the ground fighting alongside the Israeli defense force, but our money funds Israel and the Israeli defense fund. So it's almost one of those things where like, okay, we don't support we don't support the gang on your street, but we continue to buy drugs from the gang on your street, and the gang on your street continues to buy weapons with those drugs with the money we give the gang on your street. So by default, we kind of supporting the gang on your street, you know.
Yeah, I think, I mean, he hasn't come to Dearborn specifically.
I don't think he will.
He hasn't come to Detroit yet either. And I think, you know, the visits that he has have been really more focused on kind of union support rather than these other issues. And so, I mean, we're going to see if he's going to come here and address that head on. I didn't really get a satisfying answer from the campaign representatives I talked to when I kind of posed this question about how are they going to navigate, the anger about the administration's support for what's going on over there. And I was listening to some of the student journalism radio reports from Columbia last night, and it was very difficult to listen to. They have really, the campaign and leaning on its surrogates in Detroit have really focused on the impact of ARPA money. I think they're trying to say that the economy is in better shape. They're trying to say that people are having better access to economic opportunity. And that's kind of the main message that we've heard from them so far. Both President Sheffield and the mayor talked about the impact of the federal pandemic relief and how we're a lot better off because of these investments, the investments in infrastructure as well, part of which is going to rebuild 375, which we had a big story drop today about, and I'm sure we'll talk about on this podcast at some point. And just basically the argument is that Detroit is better off because of these investments. We've lost jobs in Michigan under President Trump. A lot of that had to do with the pandemic. There was a pretty steep drop in jobs and a big gain in jobs when Biden came back. But it's interesting to kind of look at these numbers because there was like a decline in manufacturing jobs over the course of his presidency, from what I recall, or maybe it was pretty flat. But this big job loss happened in large part because of COVID. And then you could say, well, his response to COVID also helped exacerbate the situation with job loss. That's a whole thing. I'm not going to get into who's responsible for what on that one, but anyway, they've been much more focused on these kinds of kitchen table issues. Sorry, my phone's going off.
No, we gonna pick right up with where you at with ARPA funding, where we get into the next story, and as we close out with this one, because it's been our connection starts with the Tell Us Detroit series talking about ARPA funding and where ARPA funding would go. So ARPA funding, where people know, and it's definitely being used. Councilmember Sheffield will speak about during the State of the City address from Mayor Duggan. One of the things he talked about is even me with my car, and I'm figuring out what I'm gonna do with my car situation, which kind of connects to this crazy car insurance situation. If you have a car on a lot, City of Detroit's going to be ticketing you now. So it's some I guess scanning sensor software that's going to be purchased with ARPA funding, and then also some contracts to just clean a lot of the vacant lots as far as cut the grass. And you said it won't be beyond 4 inches, so I can only imagine the senior citizens that live in communities like mine, they're gonna be on the phone every day right now connecting to what that'll be. So the tough thing to always remember about ARPA funding is two things. The ARPA funding is a one-time shot, meaning that it's an influx from federal funding that comes to a city connected to COVID relief. That's what it was connected to, American Rescue Plan Action dollars. And how you sustain these programs connected to after ARPA, that's the discussion point. And I guess that also, kind of going back to the other topic, is one of those things where it's if I get back in office, we can sustain some of these programs that function best for your communities, or figure out ways that we can build public-private partnerships between the federal government and your municipality. I'm guessing that's the guys. But vacant lots, cleaning up of cars, and cleaning up of grass. What was the discussion at City Council yesterday, my brother?
Yeah, so federal funding, I mean, we're going to do a big kind of recap on how a lot of this money has been spent, because I know it's a big issue, and that is kind of what we were first interested in when we met back in 2022. Every week there's federal pandemic money being used for different things. A lot of it is going toward demolition week by week, but there's also tons of different contracts for a variety of things. So Tuesday they approved contracts for federal funding that will be used to kind of come back. So the city cleans vacant lots about 4 times a year. They come out and they cut them. Sometimes they miss them. People report on the Improved Detroit app. Sometimes lots get mowed, but there's excess kind of debris and grass, and say there's some trash in the lot that doesn't get cleaned up before the mower comes through. There's shreds of weird debris and stuff that gets left over. So federal funds are going to hire a company that will come in on the back end and clean up some of these sites. And this is something that Councilmember Scott Benson talked about. It's a big issue in his district. People complain all the time about, first of all, vacant lots not being really maintained. And second of all, lots that have, a bunch of junk on them, like grass clippings and things like that. So 2 contracts worth a total of $2 million are going to pick up all that leftover yard waste after the city comes in and cleans them. And then there's another contract with Motorola for radios that will be used by the new code enforcement team that's going around to clean up abandoned vehicles. The mayor announces at the State of the City address that they're basically going to try to crack down on cars that are left out on the street for 48 hours or not operating vehicles that are just left out in public streets, as well as cars that are on side lots or unpaved surfaces if it's kind of parked alongside your house or in your backyard. I'm really curious to see how this works. Code enforcement officers have been prioritizing broken down and unlicensed cars, but people who have their vehicles parked not on a driveway, even if it's on your property, if it's not on a driveway, that's technically breaking the ordinance. So I'm wondering, who's all going to get caught up on that? We're going to have to wait to see some data come out. But yeah, I mean, those are the kinds of things that I think, to kind of tie in earlier, not to jump back into election stuff, but that's the kind of stuff that I think the Biden administration is going to be talking about, that like, look, you got this federal money. Now you can clean up abandoned cars on your streets. You can make the vacant lots look nicer. That's kind of the connection point there.
Yeah, and for me personally, because I'm dealing with that as I'm figuring out what I'm doing in car transition. Shout out to my pops, let me grip his ride for a minute. Like, and I'm looking at what this is like car insurance, because I own my vehicle. So I was paying like, I don't know, like 145 or whatever a month. You know what I mean? But car insurance now looks like, full coverage will be needed for something that will be financed. So $410 a month. So I'm still going to use that as a trade-in vehicle. I got to figure out where things go. So these are some of the same realities that exist where so many people that are unlicensed in driving because the car insurance is so high, like just the trade challenges that we're very aware of, you know what I'm saying? And what still exists. I, as they say, the tax of being poor, you know what I'm saying? It's a lot of people that have those vehicles that they want to repair. And then parking spaces that do exist, especially depending upon where you stay. You may not have a garage or a parkway, so you may own that empty lot and you may park a car there. And now there seems to be something that will be eliminated. Are there definitely some houses where people are going Fat Albert and his gang on? Yes, most definitely. You know what I'm saying? But I also know that it's a reality. So seeing how this manifests, I believe that hopefully, like a lot of this stuff, community conversations can happen between enforcement and how things move forward will definitely connect. And even in growing, some of the free growth that can exist when people choose to do free growth, how that registers and where things go, the urban gardening and what programs exist for vacant lots for people that bought a vacant lot. And it's like, okay, I'm gonna buy this vacant lot so I can park a couple more of my old schools over there. I don't know what's going on and what costs for paving that lot. We shall see. You know what I'm saying? We shall see.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, I'm really, people have a lot of issues with just not having driveways, vehicles being expensive. It's hard to drive in Detroit for a number of reasons. So, yeah, we're gonna be keeping up on this. I'm really curious to see how this is implemented. If people feel like it's fair, if it kind of causes more problems for folks. I mean, they're out there ticketing. I don't think the city wants to necessarily tow more vehicles. The mayor kind of talked about how in 85% of the cases so far this year, a ticket was enough to get somebody to move their car onto someplace that it was legal, basically. So, yeah, I'm curious.
Most definitely, most definitely. So with that being said, this is public comment for this week. Stay tuned next week. And then a couple of different things we're going to do pretty cool. Definitely check what last week was, where we was talking about reparations and the task force and some of the history, and check that 3-part series about the reparations movement in Detroit and so much more from Malachi's notebook. Detroit is different. A couple different cool things happening with Detroit is different as I'm moving around and grooving. Shout out to everybody that has supported so much with Detroit is different. More will be to come because the summer we get alive and it's getting to summertime. With that, Malachi, tell the people peace.
bridgedetroit.com. That's where all of our stuff's at. We got free newsletters going out every Wednesday morning. You will get it before you see this podcast every week. It's free. It's in your inbox early in the morning. It's jam packed. I mean, this week we had probably 5 or 6 other things on there that we didn't get the chance to talk about. So hopefully a lot of good information that you can use there. And, this is a nonprofit newsroom. We are here for you. So my inbox is always open. mbarrett@bridgedetroit.com. You can find those links online as well. Really want to get your feedback, want to find out how people are feeling about this election, how they're feeling about their choices, how they're feeling about Biden and RFK and Trump. And hope you guys, stay connected with us, because a lot of what we do is really fueled by residents and the feedback that we get.
Yeah. And you already know how I feel. You want that black vote? You talking reparations. Peace.